Hello, everyone. Welcome. On behalf of Harvard Bookstore, my name is Anna Reyes, and I'm so pleased to introduce this virtual event with KERRI NÍ DOCHARTAIGH, presenting her debut book, Thin Places, A Natural History of Healing and Home. She is joined in conversation by Maggie Smith. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Harvard Bookstore's virtual event series continues as our spring lineup flourishes, which allows us to present authors and their work to our incredible community, especially on this digital platform. Find our event schedule at harvard.com/events, where you can also sign up for our email newsletter and shop our shelves from the comfort of your home. Today's discussion will conclude with some time for your questions. If you have a question for our speakers at any time during the talk, you can click on the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and we'll get through as many as time allows. This event will also have auto-generated closed captions available depending on the version of Zoom that you're using. You may need to enable the captions yourself by clicking on the closed caption button on your screen. If you'd like to purchase a copy of today's book, in a moment, I'll be posting a link in the chat for Thin Places available on our website. Your purchases and financial contributions make events like today's possible and help ensure the future of this landmark independent bookstore. Thank you all for showing up and tuning in support of authors, publishers, and indie book selling. We sincerely appreciate your support, especially now. And finally, as you have no doubt experienced in virtual gatherings, technical issues may arise. If they do, we will do our best to resolve them as quickly as possible. Thank you so much for your patience and understanding. And now I am delighted to introduce today's speakers. KERRI NÍ DOCHARTAIGH was born in Derry, Ireland on the border of North and South Ireland at the height of the Troubles. The weight and complexity of this upbringing has rippled through her writing, which can be found in The Guardian, The Irish Times, the BBC, Winter Papers, and others. Thin Places is her first book. Joining her on our digital stage today is Maggie Smith, who is the author of several books, including the national bestseller Goldenrod. Smith is on the MFA faculty of Naslin Munn Graduate School of Writing and serves as the editor-at-large for the Kenyon Review. Today, they gather to discuss Thin Places, A Natural History of Healing and Home. Alana Haley from Schuler Books aptly describes this stunning work as a beautiful, heartbreaking, but ultimately hopeful book about how borders, real or imagined, can have a devastating real-life consequences, and how the body and mind ravaged by trauma can be healed by nature and place. Thin Places is both a memoir and a tale of nature as a healing refuge, with the history of Ireland woven throughout. And with that, we are so pleased to be celebrating this book today. The digital podium is yours, KERRI and Maggie.
Oh, Anna, thank you. KERRI, hi.
Hi.
I was just in the little sort of green room before we began showing KERRI how completely dog-eared and well-loved my copy of Thin Places is. So I thought perhaps a good place to start is to let folks hear a bit of the book if you want to read.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anna at Harvard Bookstores. Thank you, Maggie, for being in conversation with me. It's just glorious to be here. When I was thinking about what I might read today, I realised that over the last few days, myself and so many of the women that really mattered to me have been talking a lot about something that's going on in America and how that what happens there affects us all, and how that what happens to one woman, however you personally feel about anything, but what happens to one woman affects us all. And I've been thinking a lot about what that means for people, say, in our LGBT and trans community as well. And And much as a book about the natural world might not seem like it could speak to that, I suppose we are women, and anything we experience speaks to what any woman is put through. I want to read you a small section about St. Bridget, who's a really important saint, a Celtic saint, Christianized, but did exist in the pagan world before. And St. Bridget is known for much in Ireland, and I'm going to read a bit, but I want to share that St. Bridget is the person who is sort of held as being the first person to carry out an abortion in Ireland. So a woman who didn't wish to continue with her pregnancy, St. Bridget ensured that she didn't. Just feels poignant. So Bridget was known for her kindness and compassion, a flame of inspiration in an ancient world of suffering. Once she was milking her mother's cow when a poor woman came by looking for food. Bridget gave her all the milk she had in her bucket. Then she started to milk the cow again, filling another bucket, and again giving it all away to a poor man who came by. The cow had no more milk, and Bridget was terrified. The cow rewarded her goodness with more milk. Born on the threshold of a door, at the breaking of dawn, Bridget is a figure of liminality, the human equivalent of a thin place in many ways. Patron saint of babies and blacksmiths, dairymaids and fugitives, boatmen, seafarers in general, poets, the poor, and many more besides. She represents those voices that for centuries have been silenced. She saw the darkness of the old ways, and she shone a light on them, showing strength, resilience, and that unnameable thing that flows through the blood of a woman. What is it, that thing? What is that thing that makes us women? What is that thing that delivers strength in times of need? That lifts us up when we've been knocked, beaten, and kicked down? The thing that keeps us standing, even on the darkest of nights as the winds rattle at the place we thought we might be safe in. That thing that means we still rise, we still rise, we still and we always rise. We are women. Borderlines and the crossing over of them are a central theme surrounding the woman that was known as St. Bride, Bridget, Brigid. For most of my life, I have viewed myself as being on the outside, sometimes through choice, sometimes, though, kept away by external forces, from spaces and places without my desire or permission. Often this was due to where I came from, because of the fact of being born in the very particular part of the map that I was. Identity, background, history, belonging, self, also interlinked, and I had no idea how to untangle each of the strands from the other. Bridges, boundaries, barriers, the lexicon of St. Bride flowed through my veins like a blood-red cliché. We are women. Sometimes, though, the only person, the only thing keeping us on the outside, making us feel there's no way back into the harbour is our own self. And sometimes the moment comes where that falls away and we learn new words. Sometimes we even start to see a way through, to slip through the borderline, the one we built with our own hands. We are women. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Selfishly, I really just want to sit here and listen to you read the entire book. But I realized that, and actually probably I'm not alone in that. Everyone's like, please make that woman stop talking and let her keep reading this beautiful book. It's so, I love what you chose. And I think, this wasn't on my list of sort of questions and observations, but it's so interesting to me, given the context of what you read, how much of our experience, I'm I'm tempted to use the word fate, but I won't. How much of our experience is absolutely determined by the very specific place on the map where we are born.
Totally.
And people in the States are feeling that acutely right now. You know, what our experience is absolutely about where we are.
Totally. I think it's so relevant and so important to give voice to those truths. The fact that you might be someone who knows for sure that you're never going to be in that position where you have to make a particular choice, but that doesn't take away from the fact that what is put in place affects you, because you're a member of the human race. So what we do on anyone in our community is done on all of us. And I actually feel like, I was talking with someone about this previously with Margaret Renkel, and I feel that what happens is that when we disrespect anyone that we share our planet with, we're disrespecting ourselves. We're actually breaking down the relationship that we share with our own sense of self. Because actually, you know, in the Irish language, when you talk about the feeling, you don't say, I am sorrowful, or you say it's on me. So it's almost like a cloak or a garment that's not going to stay on you forever. And I suppose that if we really think about what's happening in the world, how people are being treated just because of where they come from, or because of who they are, like what they brought with them in the world and their identity and what they believe in and what they need to keep them feeling safe, and how we treat people because of that. And that's not good for us. That's not good for the people that are carrying those horrific atrocities out, whether they're verbal or physical or emotional or psychological or legal. What we do on each other, we do on ourselves. And I'm intrigued by how we can move forward towards finding a place of sort of mutual respect, because right now what I'm hearing again and again is obviously it's things like pain and violence and trauma and exclusion and barriers and boundaries, and then at the same time I'm trying to raise this little son of mine to be in a world where I think of your poetry, you know, I think of how you word this existence, this coexistence, and things that we don't tell our children that we feel, and how we try and keep going in a way that how as women, and I mean all women, how we keep holding our flame high, and what it takes for us to uphold each other, because we really need it right now, you know.
Well, I think one of the things that's been holding me up lately is your book.
Thank you.
It's remarkable, frankly. I'm wondering if, and you touched on this actually in what you read, but just because it's the title, to give some context. I mean, even in just that reading, the word threshold, the word border, the word boundary, liminal, you know, there's so much about borders and thresholds and liminal spaces throughout the book. Those sort of the idea of in-betweenness, sort of being neither here nor there. And I'm just wondering if you might talk just a little bit about like the thin place as a concept, because as someone who trades in metaphor, I love this idea.
Totally. So I had always kind of been drawn to the concept of thin places. My grandfather introduced me to it as I explore in the book, and thin places are a Celtic concept, or it's a Celtic phrase, it's a Celtic concept, and it's this idea that there are places that do exist in the world where you are sort of standing in two rivers almost at the same time, where you're here, but you can be somewhere else as well. you're in this world, but you're close to maybe what you would view as, you know, your own sense of spirituality or identity, or and actually I've been thinking a lot about it recently because I've been talking about the book a lot, and I've been talking about it with fresh audiences that might not have that sense of what it is. And I suppose a really good way for me to describe it is a thin place is, I suppose, you know, that moment where you're just about to go to sleep, or you've just woken up and you're sort of hazy and you're sort of, or if you are a person who has given birth, there is a really particular moment that comes when you are about, well, this is for me, and I have heard other people say it, where you are about to bring new life into the world, and you do feel like there is a moment, there is this kind of point where you're like on this real threshold. And I suppose if you could distill all that down, and I also was thinking about this is a really interesting, funny analogy, but I've been dreaming about my primary school quite a lot recently, and I think for a number of reasons, but I remember my primary four, so it would have been like 7 or 8, and we were learning about rounding up in maths, you know, when you're doing like 4.5 or 4.9, and whether or not to round up to the number below or above. And I remember my teacher describing that if you're on this really long plane journey and you don't have enough fuel, to turn around and come back takes so much more fuel than to just keep going. And it stuck with me so much. And I suppose I wonder if there's something about the concept of a thin place where you choose if you're going to give into it or not. You're aware, a moment comes where you're aware that you're on the cusp of somewhere or something, and you have to choose, you know, are you turning back? Are you going back to number 4, or are you continuing to number 5? So I suppose a thin place is really kind of 4.5 and after, you know.
It's a place of decision making in a way.
Yeah, in a way that can be really natural, or it can be really overwhelming, I suppose. And yes, and I think we've all experienced places like this. And I've so many readers from across the world have messaged me since writing the book, telling me like, oh, I live in Berlin, or I live in Michigan, or I live in wherever, and I've experienced it, and I know what you're talking about. And it might be like the back of an abandoned fuel station, or it might be, you know, roundabout, or it could be an old church, or so. I'm always wondering, it's not really just necessarily about the place itself, but it's also about the interaction that happens there.
Yeah.
And I'm intrigued by that a lot, what we bring to a place or an experience. They're the same, aren't they? You know, like what we bring.
Yeah, I mean, that's
to the table.
so much of this book is sort of, it's both exterior and interior. Like place is real, right? There are real places. There's a real setting or settings in the book, but also some of these liminal spaces are interior.
Totally.
You know, like that space between waking and sleeping.
Totally.
Which is sort of it's a state of mind more than that's the kind of place that it is. And it makes me wonder about, maybe that's why I do my best writing early in the morning and late at night. It's a thin,
because you're in that
barrier is softened. There's like a very thin membrane.
Yeah, it's gossamer thin then, rather than being like velvet heavy. Yeah, I think you're right. And I suppose I wonder if like the entire art of creating something in the world does require that space. And so that's why a lot of people, maybe potentially during the pandemic, when it was really a really crucial point of the pandemic, where there was no vaccine, and it felt really scary. It still feels scary for so many people. I'm not trying to minimize that, but that killed a lot of people's creativity. And I wonder if it was because people were were not fully entering, they weren't able to enter into that sort of hazy, silky, sort of diaphanous space, or I wonder if there is a link there. And I wonder as well, in those kind of, I've been reading a lot about matrescence, you know, that period of becoming a mother, and I wonder, because when I write now in the last year, it's felt really different than when I wrote before I had a baby. Yes. And it's not just about tiredness, it's about something else. And I do feel like a lot of people, when they talk about writing after severe illness, they talk about how that there's a heaviness, that it needs that sort of heaviness to go away, so that stuff is a bit more diffused and kind of where they can tap in a little bit easier.
I love that there's like a textural component to that, because I think you're right. I think
there is.
Come through some things different. Like you're just completely different. And so you have to, in some ways, relearn how to do things you've always done as a slightly
completely agree. I completely agree. It's so, I find it really interesting and intriguing, and how that how we interact with the inner landscape of ourselves. During the pandemic, I started to read sort of religiously Virginia Woolf's diaries, and she obviously was, in the war diaries, she was writing a lot about how what was happening in the exterior world, like how it was impacting on her interiority. And I find it really, really, really interesting, but also somewhat terrifying. Just this sense of that the exterior world does have and can have and should have such an impact on who we are. And I felt so for people who were sort of expected to continue in a normal enough way what their day job was, but in this like period of such deep unsettling and, you know, horror. And I suppose I wonder now, you know, how, you know, we have all of this coming at us all the time, and we are a lot more aware than our elders were of what is being done on each other in this world. And I wonder how that's going to play out in how we make art, and how we ingest art, and what the role of the artist is in this beautiful but broken and burning world.
It's huge, because of course it impacts us. I mean, how could it not? It's you know, days like today where you get up and think, I have to just go on as if nothing else is happening, because the lunches need packed, and the laundry needs moved from the washer to the dryer, and the mail needs sorted. And you know, something you said earlier too about sort of how we treat one another, I think also translates to how we treat our environment. Which you talk about so much in this book. And one of the things that I really sort of starred and underlined, because I read with a pen, unless it's a library book, and then I do not. I read with a pen, and one of the things that I starred and underlined is nature is not somewhere we go into. And I've been thinking about this idea of sort of the way, and as a poet and someone who writes a lot about the natural world, so often we think about sort of like nature as other, like this other thing. It's like there's us and then there's nature, the way that we forget that we are animals.
Totally.
And you have so many instances in this book that I can only describe as sort of magical, inexplicable experiences with wild creatures like birds, foxes, moths, dragonflies. And I found myself wondering when reading this book, how much of that magic, what I perceive as magic, is like honestly boils down to sort of openness and awareness.
Oh, totally.
I would love to hear you talk
completely. Completely. Like I do. Like you said earlier, you don't want to use the word fate, and I suppose we don't really have words for, I think, what both of us are trying to articulate. But I hear you, and I get it. And I was talking the other day about my grandfather, who features quite heavily in the book. And it was the first question in another event. And just that day, I'd been thinking about him a lot because it was actually his birthday. And every single day on his birthday since he passed away, I've seen a wagtail. So wagtails are, I don't know if you have them, they're a really beautiful garden bird, and there's a few different types of wagtail, and some are more common than others. And in Cornwall, where I am right now, you don't really see wagtails that much. You might see a common one, but you very rarely see a grey or a yellow. And in Ireland, you do see quite a lot more of them. So I thought that this year probably wouldn't see one. And for most of the day of his birthday, I didn't. And then right just before I came on the call, there was one just literally outside my kitchen window in this rented barn. And I suppose that doesn't seem like an awfully big deal, but I've spent 6 months living here and not seen one. And then on that particular day, and then I suppose so then the next call that I had that morning, there are hagstones in the book. They're holy stones, and they're really important. When you find them at turning points in your life, in Celtic sort of lore. And just that the morning of this other event, I'd received in the mail a hagstone from someone who'd read the book and posted it on. And the first question on that call was about hagstones. And then when you came on, and I didn't get a chance to say to you earlier, but when we were in the green room and you're wearing a top with hairs all over it, and so my little son is named for the person in Ireland whose creature is the hare. And yeah, and also just in the post today, because it's been his birthday, 3 hair cards arrived. And then and I know that these things don't seem like they're a big deal.
I'm a poet. I take everything as a sign.
Yeah, but I guess they are a big deal in that what it means is that in our day we're given reminders. We're given invitations. And I suppose that sometimes a point comes in your life where you've had these experiences. So Fox has come to me a lot, moments of great deep change, and I always know if a fox is in my path in any way, living or dead, that something really vast is about to happen. I always know it. And herons are the same. And I suppose that we need to think about the fact that when we were being formed, there was a point where we were inside someone else's body, and our eyes and our ears weren't attached to us yet. They were floating around, just waiting to find the place where they would become in place, and they would stay there for as long as we were able to keep our ears and our eyes. And, if that's not deeply magical, I don't know what is, and it's that sense of you could live your whole life never properly using those ears or those eyes in the way that you fully have the potential to, or you could choose to just try and learn how to do it. You could try and learn how to look. You could try and be an apprentice to listening, to just sitting and listening to what's happening to other people, and to quietly just giving space to what our human experience is. And yeah, so I try and view these points in the book when they come in my life, as they still do. They still come all the time. I try and I just view them as the invitation that I think that they are. Because I feel they are, right?
Invitation is I think the perfect word for it,
right,
too.
And
it makes me wonder, how many times did I not look up and something was there for me to see, but I missed it? How many times was I scrolling my phone?
I know the phone, right? That's the thing. That's one of those things that's there that could take away our joy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good, obviously, that comes from social media and connection and communication, and it's a really good tool. But there is something about the comparison that exists, or the sort of the darkness that can exist underneath it, that isn't good for all of us. And yeah, I try my best to be as present as I can in this life, and I know myself that I have to be so wary of it, that just that sense of be here now, you know, be here now, you know, your moment wants you to be here. You know, your son wants you to be here, your friend, your cup of tea, your book, your wagtail. They just want you to be here, right? And not being pulled away and
lots of other directions.
It's learning, right?
Yeah. I actually, one of the things I did right before I joined you today was ask word nerd Twitter or etymology Twitter to tell me if there's any connection between the words fathom and father, which I don't think there are, and I didn't suspect there were, but I really metaphorically wanted them to be some sort of root connection. And I have to say that one of the like most exciting, you know, as a geek, one of the most exciting parts of the book for me was the focus on language itself and the meanings of words and the metaphors tucked inside the meanings of words, and the sort of unexpected connections between the meaning of this and the meaning of this other thing. And I'm wondering if it's I suspect that both returning to the place of your roots means something, and also reclaiming a language.
Totally.
Would explain why that's like such a strong thread in this book.
Totally. I feel like we've had so much taken away from us. Irish people, women, really humans, I think, in general. And so much that has been taken away from us has been taken away through what has happened on land, and through land that has been taken away. And I know that in America, what you all have experienced, and what some land masses have experienced through the white man, really. And I suppose that there's something in potentially all of us that is aware of the fact that who we are today as society at large has been directly impacted on by what we are no longer able to say, by the things that are you know, that are there or that aren't. And you know, so I'm at the moment you can hear my little boy. He's just broken in.
Delightful.
At the moment, what we're trying to do, I think, is find a way to unravel what we've unravel threads to take us back to that starting point of what we could say, what we had words to put into voice. And the land is very linked for me and for so many people in that respect, because if you turn up on a stretch of land and you take away the link that the people that are from that space of land have with the land itself, you take away their connection with their own self, their connection with their elders, their connection with where they're going in this life and what matters, and how they relate to the things that they share with each other and with the non-human species around them. And I've interestingly, like, I've been reading a lot about the history of the American land, and what has been lost through that violence and that oppression. And there is a lot of crossover with Ireland. There is a lot. I know that what happened in America in many ways is much more brutal and violent, and the ripples are still potentially much more loud, and the echoes much more reverberant. But so many people had to leave the island that I come from because of the things that happened on the soil. And when a particular so if you think about it, if you think about conversation, so if you think about the things that you and I are talking about, we have many similar interests, and we probably have a lot of quite sort of crossover focal points. But if we were to bring in your granny and my son, who did just come in, and the people who are next door, and the farmer up the road, and if we were to bring in a whole host of other people, and if there were 30 of us in the room and we were all different ages and we all had different backgrounds and we all believed different things, we would need more words than what you and I need. So one by one, as we take those people out of the room, we take them away from the table, we're just speaking the same word. And like, nothing against our conversation, I love that we're having it, but you and I have so much similarity in our background. So as soon as the land is like a table. So as soon as we've taken gradually, we've removed forcibly or otherwise. Forcibly also includes people not being able to live somewhere because of a housing crisis, or because of there not being any jobs, or because of all their friends and family leaving. As soon as we remove all those people, we remove the words that are needed, because the conversation just reduces right down, it dribbles down, and then you don't need those words. So it's like my friend Mancon McGann, who is an incredible writer about the Irish language. He did this really amazing project where he went into really, really very like isolated rural parts of the coast in Ireland. And he interviewed the people there about words that they used that might not necessarily be being used regularly anymore. And of course they weren't being used regularly anymore, because the things that they spoke to had been stopped, And so I think that language, a lot of people can't necessarily see that link between language and loss and land. But, we're still doing it now. Like, we're still removing people from the table that need to be there, that have particular voices that speak to what the land has gone through. So much, that speak to what the animals have gone through, and the moss and and the peat and yeah.
And what does it do to sort of the history as narrative when the sort of aperture narrows so dramatically? It's I mean, the implications are huge. And it's I do think that a lot of what you do in this book around language is also about the sort of the power of naming and breaking silences. And, you wrote, how can we protect ourselves from things we cannot talk about? How can we protect things that we cannot name? If you can't name the problem, if you can't talk about it, if there are no words for it, then how do you address it?
Completely.
I am guessing there are probably other writers watching this, some who have read this book already, some who are clicking the link in the chat to buy it wisely, because my copy is dog-eared to hell. And I'm wondering, probably because there are people also wanting to write their stories or give voice to painful material. So I'm wondering what challenges you face writing such a candid, vulnerable book.
I interestingly found the actual writing process totally fine.
I love that.
And I was shocked by that. I was quite shocked by how okay that felt. The difficult part was the editing process.
Oh, yeah.
So I would like thoroughly highly advise people to really properly go for it with their first few drafts, and just to be really gentle with yourself, because the difficulty comes in the revisiting. For me, it was like the trolling back, the continuous excavation process of, line by line, right? Where we kind of have to, I find that incredibly difficult. And because of that, I was very grateful for the team of people that made the book, because obviously it's never just one person. It's your own editor, then your copy editor, your line editor. My agent was really involved in the book as well, and I suppose that I wouldn't have felt strong enough to give such voice to the truth of my experience had it not been for like this group of people kind of cheerleading around me. So it was an incredibly difficult book, not to write, but to edit, and then also to kind of publicize and
Yes.
all of that bit. That's become a lot easier now, but at the very beginning, when it first came out in the UK and Ireland, I just wanted to kind of pull the covers over my head, and I hadn't been expecting that. I'd thought the writing would be the difficult part, and actually, I don't know, for me, the writing is never really the hard bit. It's like people always say with mothering, the mothering is never the hard part. It's all the stuff around.
Yeah.
And with any creative process, I think the difficulties come to us all in different ways. And for me, it's always been that I just struggle with this idea that it's almost like, yes, it is my story, but it's not just my story. Like it speaks to so much of, like anybody's personal story speaks to so much for everybody else. So trying to do that as delicately and gently as you can is a real challenge.
Yeah.
But I do think it's important to be able to give voice to something that so many people do experience. So many people have gone through so much, and in reading about other people's experiences, sometimes it makes it easier to just talk about our own. And if anybody, what I always said was that I don't try to speak for anyone else's experience, but if it meant that someone could read the book and maybe if there was something in it that they hadn't spoken to a loved one about, if they could sort of hand it to them and say, look, this is kind of a bit relevant for me. And if that allowed communication to open up, that felt like I'd have ticked, the boxes.
I love that. I love books as sort of like permission slips in a way.
Totally. Like I recently reread a book that just blew my mind and kind of sewed back a lot of parts that had come untangled for me. It's a book called Inventory by a writer from Derry, a male writer from Derry called Darren Anderson, and it speaks to his truth of growing up in the same place as I did at a really similar time. And I reviewed it, and when I was reviewing it, I just remember thinking over and over and over again, like, if I hadn't read this book, I don't know how I would feel about my own book coming into the world, but somehow its existence, it's like I stood on his shoulders, like it kind of, in a way. And
yes,
yeah,
this book will be that for lots of people.
I hope so.
It will be. It just, I'm sure it already is. I want to, before I completely hog all of the time with my own questions, which I have more of, but I see there are some in the Q&A, so I want to address those. Okay, so this is a big one. Olga says, hi, KERRI and Maggie. Hi, Olga. Thank you so much for your time and your openness. In Mexico and Guatemala, the dead are always with us. When you write, do you ever feel a big responsibility to those who are no longer here but continue to voice their needs? How do you honor that space between the living and the dead?
That's such a gorgeous, pertinent question. Thank you for that. I do feel that I have always been someone who has felt that weight, even as a child. And I think some of us do feel that really deeply. And I suppose in what I always try to, because I write about intergenerational trauma in my book, which is something that I think really speaks to legacy and what we carry, and we carry so much in us, in our bones and in our DNA. And I guess that what I try to do in my work and in how I talk about my experience is, I guess, acknowledge that it's like a long line of us, and we, it can continue. So something can continue and continue. It's like that little meme where there's lots of lit matches and then one match steps away and then the fire stops. And I suppose that what I hope that I'm trying to do, I'm trying to step out of that line of trauma. I don't want to keep that rippling. And I suppose I hope that if the dead have any way of being aware of what we do and if it impacts on them, I would hope that the people who've come before me would feel happy and content and relieved that myself and maybe lots of other people who come from where we come from are trying to take those steps towards deep healing. And I guess that's how I try and honour who came before us. I acknowledge what they have gone through and the ripples that that has left behind still being here. So in a way, me trying to heal that is almost like trying to let them kind of heal as well.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's a gift.
Yeah.
And I think you write about that too. It's yes, intergenerational trauma, but also the sort of intergenerational gifts, because as we say, it's not all bad, right? So what are the beautiful parts of the legacy?
Exactly.
And sort of reclaiming language is part of it. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, there are more questions. Some people, this is anonymous. Some people say that you can't heal in the places that you've been hurt. But place and thin places are sacred. How do you see this reclaiming process during healing? That's really an interesting idea.
That is a really interesting question. And actually, I've been thinking about it a lot recently because how do I word this? We can try to do as much of the work as we can on our healing journey, and we can bring as much consciousness and awareness into how we interact with what we've experienced in different places or with different people in our pasts. But sometimes it creeps up and you feel like you've taken, one step forward and 5 steps back. And actually, because my son is walking now, he's been walking for the last few days, and I'm watching a human learn to walk. And something about that analogy of 1 step forward and 5 steps back has always rattled me a bit, because actually that's how all learning works, isn't it? And what happens is that at the time it feels like, when I think about certain places, when I think about Derry, I still do feel very raw, because even though I've done as much as I can to try and heal myself and heal my relationship with that place, sometimes it does overwhelm me. But that's okay. And I suppose that we want healing to be something that we can take off, like on I've done that. And it doesn't work that way for all of us. And so I suppose it's the intention that we bring to our healing journey and the acknowledgement that sometimes we will be steps back. So I'd done a lot of work, and a load of my friends had done a load of healing work, and then the pandemic, the sense of isolation and the lack of structure, and the in Ireland we were locked down, and so I couldn't see swim and things like that, and they're all my crutches, and suddenly they're all gone, and then I wake up wondering why I feel so low. And actually, healing is a lifelong it's a lifelong thing for many of us, and that's okay.
And non-linear. I mean, healing like learning, like grieving, like anything is not forward movement.
Totally. Anything that's non-linear, we've created ourselves, and it's a bit of a myth.
Oh my gosh, completely agree. Someone else asked, do you think that trauma and deep healing influence our ability to pay attention to the world on this beautiful, magical level?
Absolutely. Wholeheartedly feel that way. I totally feel like I'm a much bigger observer and enjoyer of wonder than what I would have been if I hadn't been in a really dark place. Now, that's not to take away from, I have friends who really jump into joy, who will openly say that that they haven't been through anything dark. Like, they will say themselves that their lives have been lucky, they'll say, you know, and so it doesn't, they're not necessarily interdependent. But for me personally, I feel like every single day that I wake up is I have the choice. I make a choice. Some days are easier than others to dive in to joy, but I do certainly sorry, feel like they're linked.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's funny, someone at a Q&A recently asked me if they thought that poets and writers were all big feelers, you know, people who were incredibly emotional.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know, I don't think so. I think I know a lot of poets are actually sort of like cool customers.
Quite
I'm not
stagnant.
one of them.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I'm not
we're
one
all
of
so
them.
different. Yeah.
But I mean, sensitivity in perception, yes, like being able to sort of put your antenna up and really see things, and being sort of big noticers might be better than big feelers. Totally.
I mean, I can see already that my son is a real noticer. Like he you know, and it can be difficult, you know. He'll notice something and then he'll be at it constantly until he's worked out how it's working.
Yeah.
But he's got that, it's there, you know. And
that's an intergenerational gift that you've passed on, by the way.
I hope so. And he's, you know, like, so my partner had constructed a really good way to keep him out of the room, and it had worked for ages. As you all saw or heard, you know, he's made his way in. He's able to. And it's
also,
like,
he hears your voice, and he's just like, but mom's in there.
Totally, yeah.
So that's where the action
completely
is.
And I think with noticing, and this is an interesting point, I was thinking about this recently, is that children are able to see, so children are able to know when we are truly joyful, or when we're truly experiencing a moment of wonder, when we're not just trying to, you know. So my son is happiest of all when I'm dancing, or with our dog. Like, he's happiest of all when the dog is on the beach running around carefree. Like, he can tell that he's got that, and he's only a year. So I suppose that we learn the ways of the world, but we lose the ways of us. And I think there's a balance in many of us. We're trying to reclaim that balance of like, I want to world, let me unlearn the ways of what society has told me, and like, let me relearn the ways of the world. You know, that sort of
not let the world sort of scrub all of that out of us.
Yeah, totally.
I agree. So I am going to ask you one more question. So it's interesting to me, like, memoir as a genre is interesting to me, because of course the book has to end, but the life keeps going.
Totally, right?
I mean, it's sort of like, it has, like, most memoirs, unless it's about something like incredibly specific, it ends when you're like, well, I'm going to stop writing about this now, or it has to end somewhere. Here.
Totally.
But the life continues after the book. You know, the story really, ultimately, the story is still unfolding. And so I guess what I want to know is what in the sort of continuing life that you're living now, like, what's bringing you peace? What's bringing you joy? You said the word joy. What's bringing you joy in this time?
Completely. That's a beautiful question, and I think we should ask ourselves that every single day. Like, what is bringing me joy, and how can I keep that lit? You know. So I hate to be that mom, and I didn't think I would be that person who would just, like, I really didn't. I did not think I would be that mother who was like, my child brings me unwarranted levels of joy, but he does. And actually he does to other people too. So it's not just the kind of parental thing. He is just so joyful. And I think what it is about him is that he notices, and he really hones in on something. And so like, we were having dinner the other day, and there were flies dancing in the air above him, and he was just fascinated, you know. And stuff like that, I guess, reminds me of childhood, you know, what made us happy as children. And so like reading, you know, reading is such a joy. Other people's experiences, like it's just unbelievable. Mending, darning my woolen things. Now that I've just finished my second book, I've got all this time back that I didn't have, and I'm just darning, you know, I'm repairing. There's something really deep in that.
Oh yeah,
you know?
there's
Right?
like the metaphor is right there. You don't even really need to.
Right.
Yeah.
And then getting my body into the sea, like get my body into the sea as much as I can, and just, you know, just try and remember who we are, you know, like all of this atrocity, all of this violence and darkness, and that's not really who we are. That's something that is so easily construed as being what humanity is. And actually, if you look at the people that you meet on a day-to-day basis, it's not. It just so happens that a lot of those people have got together in one room. And we've allowed that to happen. And I think we just need to unallow it. Like, get the right people back in the room, get them back at the table, get our elders and the members of our community who need us back in the planning. Like, let's just, you know, let's get everybody down at the table and just fix it. I suppose that is bringing me joy. Absurd as that sounds, just the brokenness that needs fixed and the awareness that we still care. We still care, or we wouldn't be feeling this raw and this sore and this angry. We still care. Like, we are still human and we still care. So it hasn't gone yet. And
there's a lot of mending to do.
Totally.
A lot of mending to do.
Totally.
Well, your book is one of the things that has been bringing me joy. So I just want to close by thanking you again for it.
Maggie.
It's just a privilege to sit and pick your brain just a tad.
Gorgeous
and do it for
to
2 more hours.
It would be so lush. Side by side would be better.
And I also want to thank, hi Anna, thank you so much to Harvard Bookstore for hosting us and just letting me fawn over her for an hour. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, I just want to thank you both so much. And I'll be completely transparent. I was back here crying. So what an absolute joy to spend the last hour just hearing both of your souls and your journeys and how you said those two tie together and we overlap in those places. You are my people. It just was such a joy to hear. So thank you deeply, both of you.
Thank you.
For both of you. With your words and your voices, and thanks to all of you who joined with us this afternoon. And on behalf of Harvard Bookstore here in Cambridge, Mass, keep reading, stay safe, and be well. Have a lovely rest of your week. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye all.
Bye all.